Hey folks, this is Jason Lewis, the producer of the From the Shadows podcast. I just want to remind you about our website, FromTheShadowsPodcast.com. We have a Facebook page. We would appreciate it if you like and follow. Also, join our discussion group on Facebook called After the Shadows. We have a Twitter feed. Please follow us on Twitter. It can be found with @podcast_from. Follow us on Instagram @From the Shadows Podcast. We have a YouTube channel. Go to the search bar at YouTube and put From the Shadows Podcast, and please subscribe to that channel. We are also on the Odyssey Radio Network, and we can be found there at odyssey1.com. We're still on the traditional podcatchers that everybody loves to listen to us on. We get a lot of feedback, so please rate the podcast and communicate with whether you're on Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, or Google Podcasts. We're there, and we appreciate it when you leave comments for us. Well, that's all I have for you right now, folks, and thanks for being a part of the From the Shadows podcast family. So with that being said, let's get this episode started. Now I'm going to turn you over to your host, Shane Grove.
Hey everyone, Shane Grove here, and I want to let you guys know that my book series, From the Shadows, is available on Amazon and Amazon Kindle. There are 3 different books available. There's Volume 1 and Volume 2, Return of the Lizard Man, and then there's a special screenplay edition which includes both Volume 1 and Volume 2 in screenplay format. So if you're a big fan of Bigfoot, lizard men, conspiracy theories, the X-Files, and mysterious men in black, I urge you to go and check out these books. And if you like them, you know what? Please leave me a great review. And if you don't like them, I apologize. So anyway, check them out. And if you really want a autographed copy, message me through From the Shadows Podcast, and I'll see what I can do. Thanks. Enjoy the episode.
You had to know these guys because we all played basketball together. We were a really super tight-knit group of guys, and we just roasted each other on just the littlest things. And the thing about it was, once we got a hold of something that we can make fun of you about,
we still do to this
day. I mean, we're talking 30 years later. Yeah. We still make fun of people for things that they did. So that was one of those things, and we talk about this a lot, that if that happened today, if I was 16 years old and I happened today, it'd be totally different because look, cryptozoology and Bigfoot, it's mainstream. There was nothing extreme about it back then.
Yeah, and I mean, I was into that stuff, and I still, at that point in time, I mean, I might have been interested, like, oh, that's kind of cool, but I still don't. You didn't think anything was like that in Ohio,
right?
There was no.
I didn't even know that there were Bigfoot in Ohio. Yeah. I thought Bigfoot was something that was out west or down south. So let's get back to questions.
Wait a minute, though. You wish you would have seen a Bigfoot that night. I mean, what you saw was like on a whole nother level of like, nope.
Yeah, now, I'm not there. There's no way that thing is biological. That a dog man running around. There's no way.
Well, that doesn't fit anything biological. I'll give you that. That doesn't make sense.
So, Shannon, I think you're not going to get your wish on that. I think that
Dang
is
it.
something.
Darn it all.
That's something that's going in between dimensions.
But Judge, did you, when you told your friends that next night in the garage, you told the whole thing as far as, so you left out the interdimensional dogmen coming out of the corn, but did you tell them how you were so scared that you jumped a fence, you went into the pool?
The whole thing.
Wow.
Jeez.
That story has not changed. I mean, that everything but him admitting that he saw something, none of that has changed in
I
35 years.
Yeah, I wasn't questioning that. I was just wondering if, because that, I think that part, once you thought about the tree, but you couldn't get up the tree, so you kept running, and you knew, okay, my friend's house is down there. I think that the part of the story that really got to be was finally when you jumped the fence, and you just dove in the pool and you let all the air out of your lungs, and you were just, looking at this shimmery, surface, waiting to see the hulking figure of this darn thing. That was terrifying. When you got to that part, I was like, that is just horrifying. Right,
and that's the part we roasted him the most about. We're like,
why you jump in the pool?
You jumped in the pool over nothing, like
over a deer?
Yeah, something you heard in the,
yeah. I'll tell you the thing about it is, and I'm not a great swimmer, and so you blow all your air out in that pool. I mean, Smitty's pool was 10 feet deep. It was deep. It was deep, and you're sitting. I'm sitting on the bottom, and just blow all the air out, and I'm plugging my nose and I just keep looking up thinking, my gosh. And the thing about it is, I don't know what I would have done if it would have been sitting on the side of the pool.
Right.
I mean, I've kind of boxed myself in by diving in the water, but I didn't know what else to do.
That would be a great scene in a horror movie where you're sitting down there and the next thing you see the snout
go into the water
and lap up some water like it's thirsty.
But the thing about it was, at the time when I dove into the pool, I was convinced that it was right on my heels. I was convinced that it was right behind me. And so I did not think that I had time to try to grab a door handle, open a door handle, run in the house, and shut the door.
Right.
At the time, just instinctually, my gut reaction was just dive in the water. And I don't know why.
Well, some dogs don't like water. I mean, you can see them. They're very terrified. So.
Yeah. So, but whatever, I mean, and to this day, people have asked me, well, do you think it really did chase you all the way to the house? I have no idea.
You don't know.
No idea.
Right.
I don't know.
But you know what? All that mattered was that you weren't sure if it was or not. So you had to go full.
Right.
That's all that mattered.
All out. So you had some questions. We're back to the question. Back to the question. Shoot.
Yes. So I think one of the top ones, which maybe I didn't ask you this, and if I didn't, I should have. I probably should have just listened to the end of it before I hopped on. But a lot of them just said, well, did he run that particular road again? Or do you run now?
Well, the arthritis says no, I don't. But I did. I actually.
And so do I.
So that was actually a good question, and one of the person from Wes's podcast asked me that. I did run that, but I waited until the corn had been harvested, and I ran with my buddy. Mm-hmm. I never ran at night again, and for years I wouldn't run by cornfields. I mean, that's one of the things that I didn't do. I just didn't run by cornfields. Like routes that I would plan if I was going to go out for a training run, I didn't want to run by cornfields. I didn't want to do it because there's always that what's lurking in there. But yeah, I waited until they had harvested the corn. And I'll tell you what though, and I still only did it during the day. But when you get down to Flickinger Road, and the thing about it is my buddy was with me, and I didn't want to say, hey man, I think there's this creature lurking in them woods. I think we got to be really careful. Right. But there's something, you know what? There's something about the daylight. You know what I mean? There's always something. It's kind of like this. You know, like you wake up at night and you've had a nightmare, right? You've had this nightmare, and you're scared to go to the refrigerator and get that drink because you think whatever was in your nightmare is going to jump from the shadows. But as soon as morning comes and the light shines in, for some reason you're just like, well, did it really happen? I'm okay. You know what I'm saying? So that's what it was. But I don't think I bet I haven't been down that road on foot more than 3 times since that happened. That's
why we were going to go do it. Just rip the Band-Aid off.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, I wish I was there for that. I would love to be there for that. Well, do you think that
for next year? So.
Well, after all this stuff going on, I think we all need a break. So if Temple Road is my break, that would be amazing. And to meet you guys would be awesome as well. But I mean, do you think that if you were one of these power walkers, or you were, on a long stretch of a break after a hard part of your run, do you think that it even would have been a thing? Would you even, be the dogman on Temple Road guy?
Well, so the question is, if it would have came out and killed me, I mean, obviously I wouldn't be around to tell the story. And they probably never found my body. But I'm not sure that was the question you were asking.
No, just like do you think the running, is what triggers the whole thing?
And it could be because, once again, you go back to this, is it a biological creature thing? And obviously, I'm sure it probably caught my scent. Because keep in mind, there's no reason at that time for any person to be out there on foot. So there's no reason. And it probably in hindsight probably caught it off guard that there was something out there. It caught my scent and it followed me and it paced me, seeing what I was doing. Or, as one person suggested, it caught my scent. So the one guy thinks when I left my house and started down Temple Road, it knew I was there, and that there were other members of the pack that knew I was there. And so they waited for me to be coming back, and this one dog man was funneling me towards the pack, that this was going to be an ambush attack. Because, and the reason why this guy, and I've told this guy, he had hunted wolves in Minnesota and Canada, and he said, look, a wolf is not going to come out and attack you one-on-one if you are bigger than it or you're the same size of it, because it would be fearful that if it got injured in a big fight, it would not be able to run with the pack. It would get left behind. And so anytime, like if a wolf's going to attack a rabbit or something like that, piece of cake, they'll attack that solo. But a bigger, larger animal, like an elk, a moose, something bigger, if you ever watch, they're going to run it and get it tired, and then they'll attack it as a pack. And so this guy's theory was that this thing was pacing me, was pushing me, because from my scent, they would have known where I came from. They would have known which direction I was going to turn anyways, because they would my scent, and that they were waiting to ambush me with a group of them. That's his theory. So I'm not saying that that's what was going to happen, but that's one of the theories, is that they travel in packs, that they're not like, most wolves, coyotes, they travel in packs. They're not solitary animals.
Ironically, though, today you'd be a much better meal for a pack.
My! I'm just gonna not say anything.
Jason, do you want to jump in and roast me as well?
No,
Jason, where are you
I'm
at,
just
buddy?
trying to maintain the noise factor over here, and I'm just enjoying the interview.
Oh God!
I just don't know how a pack of dogmen. You weighed like 150 pounds back then. Like you just made him hungry.
Well, it
was the hors d'oeuvre.
Pack now.
An hors d'oeuvre.
So you got any other questions, Shannon?
I do. I'm sorry, but here I go with the train off the tracks. I mean, so the whole interdimensional being, I'm not laughing or poo-pooing that at all, but I'm just saying, if it is that much of a higher being, why would it even need a pack? Why couldn't it just come out and annihilate you by itself?
Oh, it could have. I mean, and I said this to somebody, I think, I don't know, maybe it was talking to Linda, but I couldn't fight off a 50-pound pit bull. If a 50-pound pit bull attacked me, I couldn't fight that thing off. It'd kill me. This thing was 6 foot tall, heavier than me, and I weighed 150 pounds. So no, I couldn't have fought this thing off. It wouldn't have been much of a contest whatsoever.
I just think I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I'm just saying, I mean, I think that, especially like talking to Linda about the whole interdimensional being kind of thing, is that they're not really here to eat us. They're here to feed, they're here to breed or whatever. And they're just kind of, when they do show, maybe it wasn't chasing him to eat him, it was chasing him to get it out of its territory.
It was observing me. I don't know.
And that's kind of, I mean, if you could travel through another dimension, why would you come here and eat some skinny kid on Temple Road?
Maybe because they don't have that delicatessen on that side of the
road. Okay.
Don't you remember that? Don't you remember that old that old sci-fi from the 80s where the aliens came to
serve man.
Yeah, they came to serve man.
I'm sorry, but that was the audio bite of the entire episode. They don't have that.
Yes, they don't have that.
They don't have that.
You're like the tender. You're the tender victuals.
Just tender morsel. Yeah. Did you see me back then? Please, girl.
Yeah.
But
I mean, Jay Cutler had nothing.
Boom, dropping them. No, but it's just interesting to me because the wolf thing is interesting. That analogy of the pack and how they biologically need to, how they think and how they execute what they need to do to hunt. But it's just interesting to me that if it is this higher being, again, not poo-pooing any of that. I'm just saying it would be interesting if they were tethered to those same thoughts, if that's what they were.
What's interesting is, Wes brought this up to me, and I'd never heard this before. And he said that, the whole dog man sightings date all the way back to Sumerian culture, which is, the cradle of civilization in the Mesopotamia area. Right. It predates Egyptian civilization. And that basically, the way I described it was, I thought the Egyptian god Anubis. That was the only way I could best describe it. And he said that basically the Egyptians lifted the whole concept of Anubis from the Sumerians, and that Anubis was basically a interdimensional god to the underground. And so therefore, and if you think about that, this is, I think Wes's thing is, you think about that, the Sumerians saw these things as being interdimensional type things. And so the Egyptians picked up on that.
And the Sumerians didn't have podcasts.
They did not.
No, they did not.
They did not.
They were way behind.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess that kind of fits in with that interdimensional thing. But
if it was, if this is a godlike creature that has been
around for
many thousands of years in whatever man's history on Earth. I mean, a god would not stoop to the level of, just killing somebody, would it?
Well, yeah. I mean, but see, you're trying to use Judeo-Christian religion. You go back to pagan gods. Pagan gods were always demanding sacrifices and things like that.
But they wouldn't. I mean, they demanded somebody sacrifice to them.
Well, I don't know. But you go back to the pagans, and you go back to Norse and stuff like that. They always believed that there were gods and rivers and streams, and if you went there,
what I'm saying though is the god would be too noble to go and do the killing itself.
I don't know.
I mean, yes, no, I don't know.
I'm imagining Jason, you guys just wanting to, you're having this discussion and you can't really turn to each other because your earbuds are so close. You're just kind of.
Well, actually, the pagan gods were more vicious than that, and they would strike you down.
That's why we have Jason here as the super producer. He is our expert in mythology and paganism.
Is he? I didn't know that.
Well, he didn't read his curriculum vitae.
And now you know.
I thought he just knew how to run the Skype. Oh. I didn't know it.
One of his.
We are learning a lot tonight, guys.
Yeah. Yes, we are.
Hey, so I have a quick question. So wouldn't that run exactly in line with basically what I saw? Because I mean, it's kind of this thing where I'm saying I'm glimpsing something from another world, and kind of why me? And I don't really know that it really meant anything, but did it? Maybe it did, but it probably didn't. It's kind of that inner turmoil of why me, and does it boil down to just the fact that the judge was running? Is it that simple, or is it more than
just
that?
Pure coincidence?
Yeah.
Well, and you hear, and see, Wes is similar to Jay Cutler, that we just keep mentioning him on this.
I'll cut you in.
Podcast.
I'll cut you in.
But there's a lot of stories about that I hear when I'm listening to Sasquatch Chronicles that got people out running, and there's something pacing them in the woods or in the field or whatever. So it's not. It seems like that maybe that is something that they just do.
That's what I mean, when I was talking to Wes off the record, we were talking about this, and he said, oh, by the way, your story's not that unique. Now, the whole story of jumping in the pool and stuff is, but being paced in the woods and things like that is very common, that these things do. They will follow you, they pace you. And I was like, really? He's like, oh, yeah. There's tons of stories.
Which does, I mean, it seems silly because in every story, they're super fast, super strong.
Right.
They could, like you said, they could have just come out and totally annihilate you anytime they want, or chase you down. I mean, you're not running away from them.
No, I'm not. You're never.
So
you're not going to outrun them.
So there has to be something to that they're just, that your story about the pacing isn't the first.
Well, but the thing is, you look at David Pilates and you start talking about missing 411, and you say, well, listen, maybe not every dogman and Bigfoot encounter where they're being paced ends with the guy ripping open the door and catching his buddy watching the Playboy channel.
Hey, thankfully you got in there, okay?
Yes. But that's my point. You look at the national parks and the missing 411 stuff. How many people go missing, and they don't find anything. They don't find no clothing. They don't find their gun. They don't find their backpack. They don't find anything. And are those people that were being paced also, and they just didn't get away? My thinking is, if I would have had, suppose I would have had 3 miles to go. Now the road it wasn't that way, but suppose I'd had 2 more miles to go. Would this thing have paced me for 2 more miles? Or would it have finally had enough and said, okay, I'm going to come out and confront me?
Yeah.
I have a question for Jason real quick, if I may.
Sure.
So, for going off, Anubis and this timeless creature that has been, and God that has been written about, and then taking it and comparing it to the modern, quote unquote, modern dogman as we know it. And we know the dogman is highly aggressive, more so in your face than most, not all, but most of the Bigfoot encounters. Is there any reference to the fact that, the god Anubis or anything tied to way back when that if we're going off that vein, is there a similarity there as far as aggressiveness and this kind of in-your-face motions with it?
Well, my studies have come up with is actually the Anubis god was more associated with extraterrestrials than it actually was with dogs on this planet. But and it was more of a supernatural. It had powers. It was more supernatural, so therefore that's how it was looked upon as being a god. But more like when we have like the modern day dog man, when I'm referring to, like, say, a werewolf or something like that, how it's more visceral, it's more animalistic and everything. That's what I was thinking about originally when the judge first told me about his encounter with the dog man. And then he described it and said, well, it kind of looked like Anubis. And so I was thinking, like, well, okay then. Anubis, that goes a little further back than the ancient Egyptian god Anubis. And it always tied into something that possibly could be from another world. So it's really hard to say which one he was referring to, but it's
the interesting thing is in Egyptian culture, though, Jason.
Yes.
They said that basically Anubis oversaw the mummification of people, and that he was the one that judged the worthiness of a person's soul in the afterlife. And
he would smite a person down too. He was very vicious, and he also demanded sacrifice.
I think the Egyptians sacrificed 8 million dogs at one time.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Well, didn't they worship
I don't know what
cats?
The number was, but yeah, it was.
Didn't they worship cats?
Yes.
Wow.
I mean,
Yes.
don't you have to get rid of the dogs to worship cats?
Guess there was no PETA back then, huh?
I never
No.
thought about it like that. You got to get rid of the dogs in order to worship the cats. I actually find that humorous now.
It's the ultimate
I do remember that originally the Egyptians, that Anubis was the god of the dead in the underground. And then you got into what somewhere like around the 5th dynasty or something like that in Egyptian culture. Anubis lost that status and he was replaced by Osiris. So originally, so then it makes sense because Sumerian culture would have placed.
So maybe Anubis was looking for Osiris and came to be Cyrus.
Oh,
Oh my goodness.
And was to reclaim the title.
So there's just some folklore, but the thing is, we talk about this all the time, Shannon, is that with folklore, there's almost always some element of truth to these stories, and maybe stories change over hundreds of years, but there's always some factual basis to every folklore story.
Yeah, so. And I really think that, it boils down to, we could probably answer this with a little John Keel and just say everything is ultra terrestrials, Boom.
Yes.
There we go. We can shut it all down.
You say that, but
John Keel hasn't figured out.
Think about that someday the story about you on Temple Road will become folklore. Think about that.
Someday.
Think about that.
That's right.
That'll be folklore after we're all gone. So is there any any more
questions.
Dogman talk? Yes.
Okay. All right. Yes.
Because I have another question for Shannon. So we'll get through the dog.
Right, get through the dog.
Okay. More dog stuff here. Okay. So one of my Patreons, John, he said to the judge, of course, have you heard of any other sightings in that area since your encounter? And I'm assuming he means specifically the Dogman.
Yes. So interesting. Mansfield, which is really not very far from us.
That's where Jason is.
That's where Jason is right now. It's not
about
very far.
25 miles, actually.
There's a chapter in one of Linda Godfrey's books where she talks about there was a trailer park in Mansfield, and there were multiple eyewitnesses that saw 2 bipedal German Shepherd looking creatures come at night and was digging in the dumpsters. And, people came out and saw them and they ran. And when they ran on 2 legs. And that all the eyewitnesses all said the same thing. Looked like a German Shepherds. There were 2 of them. And they heard a clicking sound when they ran. Well, that clicking sound is a common dysplasia in dogs that happens. That I can't remember. I don't know exact words for it. But those were seen multiple times, and it was the exact same thing. Now, coincidentally, then after I was on your show, Shannon, I got an email that you forwarded to me. I think there was a lady that who was living on Quaintance Road at the time, which Quaintance Road is very close to Temple Road.
It's the next mile south.
Yeah, so it's very close. Yeah. And at about that exact same time frame, she was home alone. She had a couple Doberman pinchers, and they were her watchdogs, and anything that came near that yard or came near her house, they were barking, and they were the typical Doberman that you'd see, Garden Junkyard in the 80s movies, right? Well, one night she had this eerie feeling that there was something out back of her house, and the dogs just absolutely whimpered and tried to hide, and the dogs themselves were just terrified. And she just had this overwhelming feeling, kind of like I had with that whole, I described my spider senses went off, before the actual encounter that I had that night with that dogman. And so it was almost the exact same time frame and almost the exact same location. So, Grover and I think that whatever was outside her house that night was probably the exact same thing that was following me that night.
Mm.
Yeah, and another member of the podcast, Elisa.
Yeah, Elisa, that's true.
Elisa, actually did some research after the judge told his story on our podcast, or maybe it was before. Whatever.
She actually knew this before.
Knew it before. And there, during that same time period, north of where the judge had his experience, there were like stories going around about farmers seeing what they call devil dogs.
Yep.
That were attacking their livestock. Now we're talking mid to late,
80s.
Mid 80s.
Yep. Yes. I remember hearing about the devil dog.
So there was no, so those stories only traveled around because the farmers talked to each other about it. It wasn't, it wasn't on Facebook. It wasn't on Twitter. There was no, nobody talking about it. It was just the farmers themselves.
Yep.
Having sheep or,
what they describe, what they described as devil dogs. But when I saw this thing, the way its posture was, the way its shoulders rolled forward, it looked to me like it was probably going to drop and run on all fours. Like if it chased me, it was not going to chase me on two legs. It was going to chase me on all four. So what we've deduced is what these farmers saw was probably this thing when it was on all fours chasing their livestock.
Yeah, because
so their description would be in line with something like that, like your dog man being on all fours. That's how big it would be.
Yep, that's kind of the whole devil dog. The way they described it, because it was on all fours and it had that dog head, looked like a giant dog.
Right.
And they could tell there was something supernatural about it because of how big it was. It was way bigger than a normal dog, and so they associated devil dog.
Yeah. I mean, they called it, from what we understand, they call them devil dogs just because it didn't seem normal. I don't think a farmer in the mid 80s in North Central Ohio would have ever said anything was paranormal or supernatural.
Right.
And we think, like, we have a terrible coyote population around here in these parts now.
Oh,
but we didn't back then. Then. I mean,
I'd never even heard of coyotes in our part back in the 80s.
So I don't. It's not out of the question that maybe some of the stuff that those farmers saw, and we don't have, we would have gladly checked them out because we'd have known probably
half those farmers
just because it was all in our.
Small community.
We would call it it was in our school district, basically. But these along these roads where these people live, they're probably most of them.
I'm sure they are. Anymore. But that goes back to Shannon that these are biological creatures.
Right.
Okay, I'd like to interject about that. Now, I'm more comfortable with a theory similar to that, whether it's a devil dog or something that would be akin to, like, say, a wolf man, something that's more visceral and more animal pack-like. I'm more comfortable with that than trying to say call it saying it was a god or something like that.
We're not here for your comfort.
Well, I'm just saying, because by my studies, I really do not think Anubis would have attacked him like that. He would not be out on a hunt, if you want to call it a he at that.
He's above that. Okay.
Yes, exactly. I mean, that's been my only problem, is I didn't want to reference this thing as an Anubis. Now, as a devil dog or something like that, a creature, but if you do some research on the quote-unquote god of Anubis, no.
I think we already established he lost his status as a god.
And now he's slumming it.
Yeah, he's
Cyrus.
slumming it.
I was thinking that same word. He's slumming it with the judge.
I mean, he couldn't find Osiris, and he ended up in Osiris. And he's still trying to figure out who Jay Cutler is.
Yeah, he definitely is. He's like, what's his thermal image? I'm buffer than that guy. I have an idea. You guys could just, put up a poster of Anubis with "Have you seen me?" with your number on it and see what comes up.
There you go.
Yeah, I could probably tell you how that would turn out.
Yeah. So, Shane, did you have one more question that you said?
Yeah. Oh, and hey, by the way, just before we forget to mention this, I think it's important. If anyone wants to go back and listen to your episode on Into the Fray, it's episode 185, Dogman on Temple Road. You can hear the judge on there with me. That was a wonderful episode. But, Yeah, so the next question was from Maynard, and this one is actually in reference to a more recent episode of Into the Fray, which is episode 252, and it was entitled Redbird with author B.A. Crisp. I had her on, and this is actually, now I don't know for sure, this is something that he said should be not too far from that area where you had your sighting, and maybe you guys, the second I mention it, you'll know. But it's called Plum Brook Station, and it is in Ohio, and it's something that BA talked about where a lot of strange things went on there, possible like nuclear testing, and then all of a sudden this whole place was evacuated. They left the pens, the chairs, they just left, which is very strange. And then a lot of people started to get sick, which, I mean, maybe it's not hard to guess what was going on there. And now, which she recently sent me pictures, is actually NASA has moved into Plum Brook Station. It's still named the same thing. So I think Maynard
it's not
was
that
just
far from us. It's
in Cleveland.
It says Erie County.
No, it's in Sandusky. It's on Route 250.
It's in Sandusky. Oh yeah, see Jason.
So how far would that be from where your sighting was?
It's about where we're at right now, or from Bucyrus?
From where he had the Anubis sighting.
Oh, I'd say about maybe an hour and 25 minutes away.
Oh, not that long.
Oh yeah, because the way you have to come up, if you take Route 4 up to Sandusky, then you got to go over.
Sandusky is about 45
He's like,
minutes.
the way you drive, it'd be an hour and a half.
Sandusky is about 45 minutes from Bucyrus, from the road that the judge had to cite.
But if you
from where he had to cite.
If you look at Sandusky, so if you look where Sandusky is, okay, and you look where Temple Road is 4 or 5 miles outside of Bucyrus, going north towards Sandusky. A dog man, a Bigfoot, a predator could easily traverse that area and never be seen because the amount of
Sandusky
wood.
River.
Oh, you could just follow the Sandusky. I mean,
and get there quickly,
follow the Sandusky
right?
River.
Yes.
I mean, I mean, it would very easily be able to traverse that area and just go through woods, cornfields, riverbeds, and no one would ever see it.
Yeah, I just think he was kind of just hinting that, maybe there was a tie-in there because there was a lot of weird stuff going on at that place. And I actually meant to send you guys this yesterday when I got this message just so you can look over it. But it might be something to look at in the future, like as a group, like all of us, and you can go back and listen to that episode. But there's a lot of weird stuff going on at that Plum Brook Station. So I don't know. Maybe it's tied in. Maybe it's not.
Space-time continuum.
Yeah, maybe they have another CERN going on there.
Maybe that something just got out of the cage.
Yeah, whatever they were working on got out of the cage.
It wants a tender morsel.
It sits way off the road. I mean, you can see it, but it sits quite a ways off the road.
Yeah, at some point
you need to do a field investigation going up there.
Yeah. You can find
Sacrifice
another hole in the fence. I remember her talking about she went through a hole in the fence when she was a kid, and it should have behooved me to look at the year because that would have tied in probably better. I apologize. I'll send that to you guys once we're done. But if you find a hole in the fence like she did, she went in and she got like full on like guards in her face screaming like, "What are you doing in here? You need to get out now. This is restricted." So it was like no muss, no fuss back then, especially. Right. So who knows? It could be nothing, no tie-in, but that's what Maynard was kind of wondering. So maybe it was something to put on the radar.
Yeah, the time frame of that.
Yeah, I'll look that up. I'm sure that she mentioned that early on in the interview. So
Shannon, now that I just want to kind of, how many episodes are you in to your podcast?
Let's see. Tomorrow will be episode 258, I believe.
258. Okay. So I got just a couple questions. What one episode other than the judges we've already established is the number one of all time?
Gosh, that's so mean to ask. That's so mean. It's like, which one is your favorite child?
I'm not gonna phrase it as what's your favorite, but what story really stands out to you, like absolutely 100%, you really are by that story, and
blew you away,
and you want to go out and investigate that story.
I don't think it's so much I want to go out and investigate. I'm hoping that it comes to investigate me, or
this is about
it.
Jay Cutler.
This is a Jay Cutler again.
You got me. No, actually, it was my episode titled Robert, which it begs to question that it may have actually been as silly as it sounds. No, actually,
we can't even talk about him without asking permission to talk about
him. Yeah, and again, because I kind of giggled after you mentioned that, so we should say we're sorry for giggling.
Sorry, Robert.
Sorry, Robert.
We apologize, Robert.
Utmost respect.
We didn't mean it, Robert.
No, we were not speaking about you. We think you were amazing, and you just be safe down there, with anything going on the Keys. No, so the episode Robert was a guy that came on the show who, back when he was still underage, but he admitted they went down to Florida for spring break, and a whole bunch of them, and they didn't have a lot of money, so they had to stay in this kind of crappy hotel down there in Florida, in Panama City, I think. And this guy shows up at their hotel and knock, knock, knock. Hey, can I party with you guys? They're like, no problem. There's a bunch of them, whatever. More the merrier. And the guy's just weird. Like, he just gives off this weird vibe. And Nick, my interviewee, says that during the very first night, during a card game, this man who had named himself as Robert looked over at him, and everything about him within seconds had changed. Like, physically, I mean. Robert, the bone structure in his face had changed. His hair had receded and changed color. His eye color, everything about him had changed. And he went outside because he was freaked out. And the next day, one of the other gals comes up, a friend of his, and says, Robert says that he made his face change for you too. And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. He just was too freaked out to talk about it. And the weekend goes on for spring break, and they're going about their business, but Nick just could not let this go. So he goes and rummages through some of Robert's things, because on top of the face change thing, he said that Robert was excruciatingly polite and well-spoken, like he was from another time, and he never saw him eat or drink. So he was compelled to go through his things. So he patted down his pants. Obviously, Robert had, whether he was actually sleeping or not, who knows, if you gather my drift. But he had, went through his pants and found no wallet, no anything else that might be in a regular pair of a man's pants. But he did find a little black book that was filled with nothing but names. No numbers, no addresses, just hundreds and hundreds of names. So, the weekend goes on, pretty much nothing else weird happens. But to this day, Nick says, and this was years later that he had come on my show after this had happened, and he said he thinks about Robert all the time. And that Robert, during the trip, had brought up the fact that, oh, it's so strange that you have never met anyone like me. And I am not a proponent or a big fan of EVPs, which, if no one knows what that is, or anyone listening doesn't know, it's called electronic voice phenomena, which can happen anytime. You can be on the phone, you can be out ghost hunting and looking for them, or you can be recording a podcast, and sometimes they can dribble in, obviously. And I'm not a big fan of them, but very strangely, during this episode, at the very time that I was asking what Nick thought Robert was, or who he was, what was this thing, what do you think was going on, in between my speaking and Nick speaking, you can hear something go, vampire. Just like that.
Oh!
It was the creepiest thing. And I didn't even catch it. This was, I mean, talking once it aired on Thursday night. By the time I woke up Friday morning, I had multiple messages and emails going, go to 38 minutes, 22 seconds. You have to go hear this. Something is saying vampires.
Look this up.
It was insane. And I don't like EVPs. I'm not a fan of them because they're highly suggestive, right? Mm-hmm. But in this case, and I've looped it, I'm trying to figure out what in the actual world is going on. At the very time that Nick had kind of mentioned that Robert was hinting this is what he was. This thing comes over, and this is, mind you, after Audacity's noise removal, which people that don't know, when you're a podcaster, you try to clean your podcast up, you go into Audacity or another editing software, and you take out some of the noise. And that
taking notes, Jason. Are you taking notes, Jason?
Yep.
No, Jason.
It's called leveling.
The old leveler.
Comfortable with that.
Yeah. The old leveler. You can't beat the leveler, man. Yeah, so that still to this day, really, that's the only thing that I'll ever say EVP wise that ever got me really, really excited.
So that was Shan, we're putting you on the spot. What episode of Into the Fray is that?
Oh, okay. I'm the worst with this. Hold on. I haven't. It is on the spot because that is like the worst thing.
Because I guarantee you, every one of our listeners is going to go to that episode to see if it says vampire.
We're so right.
But I do know now why you got a personalized license plate that says TJ185. That's your episode number on Into the Fray. The Judge 185.
I mean, if that was true, boy, would that be flattering, right? Okay, so no, Robert is episode 158. And just because, honestly, Nick to this day says, I really believe that Robert is out there somewhere, and I'm wondering if he, looks in on me or follows me. And many a times when I bring up Robert, I say, if you're out there, I would love to talk to you.
Careful what you wish for.
I know.
That's right.
I know. We hear it all the time, whether it be a cryptid experience or a paranormal experience. But that was probably one of the ones that, and it wasn't just because of the EVP. That there's something so interesting about.
The guy changed his face.
Being around.
Yeah, and he did it for at least two people.
At first, when you started telling that story about these kids on spring break and this weird guy showing up, I thought it was a whole nother Judge episode. He showed up at spring break.
Something that he probably deals with weekly, right? I mean,
no, I thought he was the guy because him and the guy who he jumped in the pool, they have a couple good spring break stories, but that's a whole other podcast.
I'll bet. Hey, Judge, you're welcome back on anytime to tell those stories. Into the Fray after the dark. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, when you told that, when you first said that, my first thought was anybody out there that's a Game of Thrones junkie like I was, you have the many-faced god from Game of Thrones where you could change your face to whatever it was. I was like, oh my gosh. It's a Game of Thrones reference.
It's funny you say like the EVP thing is Jason, do you remember me telling you that we had one of our listeners, Marion, is a diehard listener, and she sent me a message, and we recently had a group on the Ghost Sisters. They're a paranormal group, and they had gone down and investigated this shrine, this Shinto shrine.
It's crazy stuff.
And we had the guy that runs the caretaker on. And then they went down and investigated this place and were giving us an update. So, Jason and I spoke to him one night and put the episode out, and Marion sends me a message. She goes, hey, when you guys were talking when the one Ghost Sister, Mandy, was talking, did you guys notice the girl laughing in the background?
Mm.
And I didn't notice. And she goes, oh yeah, she told me I think she kind of told me exactly where it was. So I got a hold of Mandy of the Ghost Sisters and said, hey, when you guys were on the phone, was there other people there? And she goes, no, I need to go listen to it. So she went back and listened to it. She goes, oh my God, there's a voice on there that I never heard. Jason never heard. I didn't even hear it when I listened to the episode the first time. And Mandy's like, yeah, there's a voice on there and it's none of us. And it was just a girl giggling.
And that's what's so crazy. You don't hear it at the time. We didn't hear anything at the time at all. And not to add any extra editing, or even if you just wanted to put it into show notes and not cut it into the show. But if you guys are interested, I could, of course, send you a couple files that I made of just trying to isolate that and everything. So if you wanted, yeah.
Oh yeah, that'll be great now that we have to walk out to our cars after this episode in the dark.
Yeah, have fun. If you meet Robert before me, I'll be real upset.
That's a creepy
I'll pass on meeting Robert.
That's creepy.
I mean, I don't know. Wouldn't you, Judge? Wouldn't you want to meet Robert before you saw the dog man again?
Yeah.
I'm not convinced.
Yeah, but here's my question about Robert. Who are the names in his book?
And
what
do they symbolize? I mean, are these people that he is drained, or
and even more eerie is him being surprised he hadn't met anybody like himself.
Right.
Yeah.
Meaning, alluding to the fact that there's more
of these guys creeping around.
Yeah, he's like, you haven't met anyone like me before? I mean, who says stuff like that? That's very, very odd.
Yeah.
So I do want to ask then, and is all the stories, all the stuff that you've heard and been exposed, is there one cryptid that you cannot really wrap your arms around and believe that
such a thing would
exist?
Good question. No, I don't think so, because after what I've seen personally, it wasn't a cryptid per se, I guess, I mean, who knows what they were, but I can't scoff at anything really anymore. I really can't. And you know what, Judge, you're one of the ones that I bring up a lot of times, because I think that people do have a hard time with Dogman. I mean, I have as well at certain points. I'm going kind of, it's just a strange thing to be running around this planet. It's something like a Dogman, right?
You're right.
But after talking to you and talking to these other people that have these, they see like basically what you think of as a leprechaun or a troll, like in the woods, or things that you go, what in the actual heck is no, that can't be a real thing. But when you talk to the person that had that experience, it changes your mind. Like, you believe them. They saw that thing. They know they saw that thing, and you cannot change their minds about it. And after talking to you and others like you, no, I would have to say honestly, there is nothing that I can't wrap my mind around, because I think that kind of anything is possible, and I'm sure that my own experiences helped me to be in that category.
Well, I go back to the old adage: if what I saw is real, what else is real?
Right.
You can't say, well, I believe that Bigfoot's real because I had an experience and that's why I think it's real. But I don't believe there's a dog man because I don't believe your experience. It's kind of disingenuous. And so I can't really, I mean, there's right close to Jason, was it Charles Mills Lake, Jason? Is that what's over Mansfield?
Yeah.
Charles Mills Lake, yes.
Lake. Yeah. There's something called the Mills Lake Monster that back in the 50s or whatever somebody saw. And the way they described it was something cartoonish. And I'm like, it doesn't sound. But at the same time, people saw it. And if people saw it and more than one person saw it, who am I to say that can't be real?
And you don't know their frame of reference.
Right, correct. I don't know the frame of reference.
Do you mind just really quickly glancing over the description of that?
Sure. Real quick. This is something I've read. Give me 1 second. Look it up.
Because that is interesting for people to, more than one go, it was really like, it was that out of the box. But that's how they
it was like,
it, right?
if my memory serves me correctly, they described didn't have legs or arms. Let me double check.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. It was
Okay.
something
Yeah,
that was
that's
like
on the no
weird,
list already.
Yeah. It's like, yeah.
That's nightmare fuel right there.
Yeah. 1959, Charles Millick. 1959, 3 young men from Ohio claimed to have had a face-to-face encounter with one of the most bizarre critters ever to emerge from seaweed-strewn lake bed. An encounter so brief and perplexing that even most cryptozoologists don't know what to make of it. Trying to get down to where, because keep in mind that's close. Also, you get into Loveland Frogman.
Right.
Yeah.
Charles Mills Lake's about 100 miles away from Loveland, is what it says. Let's get to. Okay, come on. Let's get. Okay, flat out the weirdest. Okay, they claim to have run in with one of the flat out weirdest varmints that anyone has ever chronicled, at least in Ohio. The youth men testified they were cavorting near Ruggles Road, blah, blah, blah. Okay, they saw a strange 7-foot tall being rise up from the black water in front of them. They said it was armless. It was humanoid. They later would describe the beast as being a huge armless humanoid with luminous green eyes, large webbed feet. Needless to say, the teens wasted no time in exiting the scene and were swift to report their unusual encounter. They went right to the cops. But I think there was other, and then in 1972, I think there were other sightings of this thing, but it was an armless creature, and so it's like, So
it's basically like Mothman with its wings tucked back, right? Like just.
That's a good way of putting it.
Boy, that's not to diminish that at all. That is just so interesting. I had not heard of that thing yet.
Yeah, and then there was later another sighting.
Ken Gerhardt tell us that when he was, isn't that why he went over to when he was in his band and they were playing in Mansfield, they went out there to kind of investigate that sighting, many years later, and then he ended up seeing a UFO.
Yeah. So, but also not far from there's another creature called the Murphy's Board mud monster that almost same identical description.
Yeah, I've never heard of that one. It makes you wonder if it's the same creature or not.
Well, I think they're alluding to this article because both of them were described as armless with glowing eyes. So there you go.
And coming out of the lake, the mud monster. I like that.
The mud monster came out. I think the mud monster came out of a sewage, like a drainage sewage thing. People saw that thing crawl out of there. So
now listen. If that's a person, they are very dedicated to their dark
to their
craft.
hopes. Trust me.
Holy smokes!
Was it Mike Rowe from Dirty Job?
Yeah. No. So I mean, look. Yeah, I guess you could say, "Hey, listen, I'm gonna scare these teenage kids. I'm gonna come up out of the lake in this silly costume."
He's like, "What? It's my lunch break."
Yeah. But to crawl out of a sewage drainage thing.
Dang.
But Shannon, I think the more your answer to that question, the longer that we have done this and the stuff that each of us have experienced on our own, I think we probably are right there with you that you can't really discount anything. Yeah. How can you?
Well, and then that's why we started this podcast in the first place. And we called it From the Shadows because we want people who are listeners to not be afraid to share their stories and be roasted like I would have been when I was 16. We want somebody who may have experienced something like the Charles Mill Lake monster to have the courage to call us up and say, "Hey, this is what I saw," and we're not going to say, "Are you kidding me?" You know what I mean?
No,
that would defeat the whole purpose of our.
No, we do like to have fun.
We do,
because even 30 some years later, after what the judge saw, you can't take it so serious to the point where you can't sleep at night. We do have to kind of,
I still take it pretty serious.
Have a little. Do you really?
Yeah, I take it serious. Dude, I tell this. I'm not joking.
He runs shirtless nowhere. Okay.
No, first,
he's no Jay Cutler.
No,
anyway.
But the truth is, when I walk outside, like at my house, if I walk outside and it's dark, there's always this part of me that's what is standing around the corner of the house looking, what is, lurking in the name of our podcast, in the shadows, from the shadows, what's out there. So it has always had that impact on me.
See, and that exactly right there is why I think it is so important that people come forward and they tell their stories. And it's important for us as hosts to realize that, yes, it is so difficult for people to come forward, because I know it was for me. The first time I told my story on any show, I was like sweating and I'm having to, I swallow, my mouth is dry. And even though I knew the story very well, I hadn't said it out loud in nearly 30 years. So when you say that even to this day, it's dark, it's ingrained in you. It's like a PTSD situation.
Right.
You cannot tell me that people that have that feeling still to this day did not encounter something. They did, just like Robert in Salt Fork and you in Ohio all those years ago with Dogman. You cannot tell me that you folks didn't see something. It is real. These things are out there.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because there's no benefit for people to come forward and really say that. I mean, because you can get publicity other ways nowadays.
Yeah, I mean,
you don't need to.
Yeah, but the interesting thing is, like, I've seen other shows like Monsters in America and things like that, and I have noticed people are telling stories from when they were teenagers, and they have a similar story that I do. Is, well, I didn't tell anybody because I didn't want to be shamed, and I didn't want to be made fun of, and that people laugh at me and be the town kook.
Yeah, exactly.
So I appreciate all the podcasters out there like Wes and Shannon, who Paranormal Road, who are giving people the forum by which they can share their stories in a safe manner where they're not going to be ridiculed or basically shamed or like, oh yeah, sure, that really happened.
But also, how important is it for people like you to come forward and actually share your story and have the balls to do that? Because it does take the stones to do so.
Yeah, it's therapeutic.
Especially me. I mean, in my position, my brother, who's also a judge, said, dude, you really want to go tell people this story? I mean, you're an elected official. Do you really want to? And I told him, I said, I think it's important for me to tell this story because, I have something to lose. I'm an elected official. People could listen to this and say, dude, this is really the guy we want to be the judge in our county. So if I have the courage to come forward when I'm someone that actually has something to lose by telling the story, I think I'm hoping that it would inspire people out there to come forward and tell their stories. And we always say at the end of our podcast, at least we try to, if there's anybody out there that has a story and they want to share it, get a hold of us. Even if you don't want to come on the podcast, if you just want someone to tell your story to.
Yeah, a lot of people from the community when we first started, I got messages from people who I never in a million years thought they saw a ghost, a UFO, or anything had some paranormal experience, and they were people I knew, and a lot of them were parents of people that I grew up with, and you would have never, if you had to make out a list, who do you think is going to tell you a ghost story first? They would never have been on the list because they were, and
30 years ago they would have never admitted.
Oh, never admitted, and they've all come out and said, hey, I don't want to come on the podcast, but I do hear what you guys are doing, and we appreciate it, and I just want to tell you my story. And it's fine. I mean, if that helps them out, I mean, I can't really do anything but listen. There's nothing I can do to change their story or anything like that, but we know then that they are listening every week to hear other stories similar to theirs. Right. And it kind of gives them comfort that there are other
people. I'm not the only one out there. I'm not crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, and honestly, when you get down to it, when I started, I think at the base of any of this stuff is that you don't want to be alone. I think that is the driving force, is that I keep hearing people, and it has nothing sometimes to do with a shadow in the corner of your room or a shadow in the forest like mine. It's just people that have things that they cannot explain, and I sure as heck cannot explain my experience. So to provide a place for people to do so is really a good experience, and it's why I do it. It's not because I think I'm so incredible and I'm a great interviewer. I don't think that at all. I try to lend an ear, and I think that after having my own experience that I can be empathetic to people and understand where they're coming from.
I'd be interested if we went back in time 35 years ago and had, a room full of 100 people, cross section of communities, and said,
who would admit to
who in here would raise your hand if you've had either a ghost experience, a Bigfoot experience, something that you couldn't explain, it scared you, raise your hand. I bet you get very few people raise your hand. If you ask those same people today, if you did a cross section, I would be willing to bet 90% of the people in this country have experienced something at one time in their life that spooked them, that they couldn't explain, and to this day, it's a story that either they've told or they'd like to tell. I would bet 90% of the people have.
The best is the people who tell you a story and they say, well, I'm a skeptic. But they tell you this great story. And you're like, and you're still a skeptic?
Yeah. You didn't need a diaper on that day? I mean,
what's it going to take to convince you to not be a skeptic? So,
yeah.
But, well, Shannon, we've kept you long enough, but we really appreciate you spending some time with us and telling us some really good stories.
Oh, and I guarantee you, go listen to
number 158.
158. I'm doing
185.
185.
No.
Oh, are you talking about Robert?
185. Oh.
Yeah, you're 185. Yeah.
But which one's Robert? Robert's
158.
Oh, so
yes, Robert is 158. I'm sorry.
Don't act like you don't know. We discussed your personalized license plate. I mean,
and it's kind of weird though. I didn't plan that at all.
It is.
But I didn't actually think about that before just now. Yeah.
So before we let you go, tell all of our fans, all 30 or 40 of them, how they can where they can find your podcast, where they can buy your books, the books that you help publish, like your publishing arm, where they can find everything they need to find out about you.
Absolutely. So home base for Into the Fray is the website, intothefrayradio.com. Of course, all the podcatchers and iHeartRadio, Spotify. I also publish on YouTube. And, of course, the books are on Amazon in ebook, paperback, and audiobook. And then beyondthefraypublishing.com is where you can find, we've been publishing books for King Gerhard. And we've got Dave Schrader coming up. We've got Hauntings and Histories in Ireland. So all kinds of interesting things going on there. But, and you guys can always contact me, anybody, on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. But thank you guys so much for having me on tonight. It's been a blast.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I mean...
Oh, it's a great time. Yeah. Good stories.
So
very interesting story,
my goodness.
Shannon. Very interesting.
It is really late, but tomorrow while I'm on the mail route, I'll be listening to episode 158 of Into the...
Let me know what you guys think about that. And if you want, I will send those extra files to you. But yeah, I would be interested to hear you guys after hearing Nick.
Yeah, I'm sure our listeners would want to hear it.
And if any of our listeners know how to get a hold of Jay Cutler, I'm going to be working all my angles that some of my contacts. I bet you have some
connections, yeah.
And we'll see what we can come up with to, make that.
Make him a guest on the show.
Make him guest 259.
Maybe we could have him pose next to a dogman and see who's actually buffer. Because you hear them quite cut and built and
yeah. Well.
Jason, this is where when you finish the Barry White starts playing. Okay, you got that?
We got the drop in there.
There you go. Hey, Shannon, thanks again, and
thank you guys.
we encourage our listeners go check out Into the Fray.
Yes, we do. So have a good night, and we will talk to you later.
Yeah, thank you, Shannon.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the From the Shadows podcast. Until next time, never shy away from the darkness or what may be lurking in the shadows. We are out.